Another question that I receive often is, do you always play with new strings? How often do you change your strings? And the answer is not as often as you may think, especially not on my classical guitars. It depends on what I'm about to record. For example, you might remember from my instructional video that overtones ring in the bass strings when I play a melody on top, or vice versa. If I record something that has that kind of a nature, I want new bass strings because they produce these overtones. However, if I record a piece like any classical, any piece that has both bass and melody lines at the same time, I often prefer to play with older bass strings because I do not like as many overtones being produced in the bass strings. That has multiple reasons. One of the reasons is that if I have a softer bass tone, it is easier for me to also have a softer sounding melody without the bass competing with the melody in sound. If I have a very brilliant bass and a very soft melody, I feel for me it seems to overlap the frequency spectrum too much. You often hear in a recording of a whole, let's say a jazz band, that the bass does not play with the most brilliant sound because the bass tries to stay in the background and not overpower the melody. The second reason, and it's very complex, has to do with the tempered tuning of a guitar. I'm not going to go into what tempered tuning exactly is, but because there's many other videos that explain that really well. But what it means is that the overtones on a string do not always match the notes that we play higher. For example, and I switched over to a steel string guitar because it's easier to explain here. The two E's are tuned perfectly. However, the overtone, G sharp on the E string, does not match the G sharp that I would play on the high E string. For that reason, if I play a piece that has full chords where I play both bass and melody at the same time, I often prefer all the strings that do not produce all the overtones, because if they did, you would end up with an uglier sound than if you did not have the overtones. Another scenario, of course, is if you're playing something very bass string oriented. The Villa-Lobos Prelude No. 1. In that particular case, obviously you want new bass strings. When it comes to treble strings, I change those treble strings very rarely. I do not like the sound of new nylon strings. For me, they take at least a week or two to even start sounding good. And once I have a good sounding set of treble nylon strings or carbon fiber strings, which I sometimes use, and the intonation works well on those, I sometimes leave them on for up to a year. What I do, however, is take my fingernail, go underneath the string, and feel if it has any markings from the frets. Once I start feeling those markings, I will exchange them. But other than that, to me, the treble strings on a classical guitar sound better when they're older. Steel string is a very different story. I change strings on a steel string or acoustic guitar considerably more often. If you like this video, strike like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to be informed about upcoming videos.